Hello, and welcome to all to this webinar on From Decolonial to Indigenous Approaches to Constructing Knowledge, Where is the Academic Indigenous Network Heading? Which is hosted by APA Division 52 International Psychology. This webinar is part of series titled Vision from the Global South, to celebrate the activities of psychologists that live in the Global South, to provide useful information for international engagement, and to encourage us to take a broad and global perspective. This webinar series has been founded by the Interdivisional Grant Cultural Competent Counseling Vision from the Global South in partnership with the Division 17 Counseling Psychology. My name is Pina Marsico, and I'm the president of Division 52 International Psychology and your host for today's webinar. I want to thank the members of the webinar committee, Dr. Theo Lazarus, the chair, who is connected with us today, Dr. Tatiana Eknour and Raffaele Modugno, also connected with us. Before we begin, our online audience have the ability to ask questions by typing them in the chat box located at the bottom left of your screen. So please feel free to type your question during the presentation. You may write not only in English, but also in Portuguese, in Italiano, in Spanish if you want. And I will be making note of them. I will organize the question, and during the last 10-15 minutes, I will present them to the speaker for the discussion. And at this moment, I will introduce and welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Danilo Silva Guimarães. Is Associate Professor at the Institute of Psychology, University of São Paulo, Brazil. He has been working with the theoretical and methodological issues concerning the cultural construction of senses from a semiotic, cultural, and constructivist perspective in psychology. He focuses on investigation. His investigation is about the tensional boundaries between cultural authorities, indigenous psychologists, and Amerindian people. So please, the floor is yours, Danilo. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Pina. Baí, Jaúdio, Tirerema Tupande Cupé, Juruapma Danilo, Aipotá, PME, Penhemonguetaporã. I began with a greeting in the Guarani language, wishing us a good conversation today. I'd like to present some slides. I will share my screen here. Well, as Pina just presented, I will discuss with you some aspects of a project I'm developing that is an effort to decolonize some psychological discourses and practices addressing indigenous approaches to constructing knowledge. We created since 2012 an academic indigenous network here at the University of São Paulo. So this research is based on the analysis of the public documentation or public available documents constructed by this network or about this network. Yeah, this project is funded by two important funding agencies in Brazil, FAPESP and CNPq. And I start with a description of the Indigenous Network. We have two descriptions. The first description we put based from the indigenous perspective. The Indigenous Network is part of the movement of indigenous peoples to indigenize scientific academic knowledge and universities. And we have a description too that's more institutional, that conceives this network as a service located at the Department of Experimental Psychology of the Institute of Psychology of the University of São Paulo, Brazil. Now we have all the time here different point of views or perspectives about what we could describe through the same label, for instance, the Indigenous Network. This process of contrast between perspectives will appear in different moments of this presentation. What's the aim of this research? From practical university extension activities, we have carried out research in the field of psychology, focusing on the history and philosophy of psychology, with the aim of decolonizing the territory of knowledge, how and why. So that's what I'm going to present here. Well, we started with the notion of university tripod we have in Brazil. Is a constitutional precept that governs Brazilian universities and defines their role in society. The university tripod is based on extension, research, and teaching. The teaching part is about training people and is the way someone from the external community of the university is the way some people can access and become a member of the academic community is through training. The research is about building new knowledge, systematizing data into functional relationships, and the extension is defined as the way the university has to bring the knowledge to the society, or is one of the ways the university accesses the external community. So we depart from this tripod and analyzed some aspects of them in the context of the University of São Paulo. For instance, we have more than 5,000 professors, more than almost 13,000 technical administrative professionals, more than 100,000 students. So, nevertheless, we have concerning professors in the statistics in the annual report of the university, we have only 2 indigenous professors, for instance. From 2,000, more than 2,000 technicians and assistants, we have only 5 self-declared indigenous persons. From more than 100,000 students, we have only 147 persons self-declaring themselves indigenous. So it is less than the self-declared indigenous proportion in Brazil, a lot less. So we have a very small indigenous community in the university. And it implies that also in the scientific aspect, the social normativity of research methods doesn't dialogue effectively in an effective way with the indigenous strategies of knowledge construction, or with indigenous epistemologies and with indigenous interests or topics for research. So we know from preliminary studies how the cultural ground of academic knowledge is constructed concerning the rites, the myths, or the narratives, and the reflections and actions that are based on the culture of the professors, the culture of the students, the culture of the academic community guides the possibilities, the questions, the issues, and also the methodologies of research. Then it has an impact for scientific knowledge construction. And in the extension part, the access to external community, usually the idea is to bring the knowledge from the university to the society. But when we talk about indigenous communities, what we notice is that there is a gap. The university and at least the psychological discipline I'm in doesn't know a lot about the indigenous community. So the need is, on the other way, to learn from the indigenous communities. So that's the way we constructed our indigenous network. It was based on the extension part of this tripod, but it was based on building dialogical forums in order to exchange ideas, not to bring the knowledge from the university to the communities, but to try to construct a dialogical space. And since 2012, we have made a lot of projects that also involve psychotherapy, interdisciplinary community care, diffusion of language and culture, and so on. Well, and what about indigenous knowledge? Just a summary. There are 40,007 million indigenous people around the world, and they are spread across more than 90 countries. They belong to more than 5,000 different indigenous people, traditions, and they speak more than 4,000 languages. It's the World Bank information. In Brazil, we have, according to the census, 305 indigenous people, and they speak 2,276 spoken languages only in Brazil. So we have a large diversity in the world and also a large diversity in Brazil. And the indigenous people in Abya, as we talk about the now called American South and North American continent. So in Abya, the indigenous people, they contributed a lot with social and scientific knowledge. There are some reports, some papers that considers that about 60% of the world's food supply originated from Amerindian traditions. Indigenous people, concerning gender, they were able to consider and understand 6 gender categories among in different societies. They deal with gender issues in different ways, but usually 6 gender categories were new, and they were part in the indigenous social gender structure. Concerning power, the participatory democracy has a lot to do with the indigenous ways of decision making. North American Constitution acknowledge how the ways indigenous people organize power and decisions influenced the democracy in United States, and the democracy from United States influenced democracy in different part of the world. So some studies, they say that the principles, the justice principles of liberty, equality, fraternity were influenced by indigenous people. They developed community-based alternatives to totalitarianism and community-based land management, restorative justice strategies. So it's also very important. The devices of restorative justice are being developed, very attentive to the ways the indigenous communities create justice. So not to say arts and science, medicine, and a lot of knowledge, the knowledge of territory, and also the knowledge of the plants and how the plants can be used to cure, and so on. Then, okay, just a small summary. So some parts in psychology, some parts of the different traditional knowledge become introduced and they are emphasized in the emergence of psychology as a science. So we have in the Western world the influence of Greek, Roman, Judeo, and Christian societies in the beginning of the psychological psychological emergence as a discipline, and a lot of other conceptions, they became apart from the definition of what the psychological scientific knowledge is. So this picture is it shows the flow of disquieting experience in elaboration and to be included in the field of psychological issues. So we have the flow of experience and how some knowledge, some ways of living and some ways of reflecting are being accepted as scientific notions and other are excluded. So when I say indigenous notions, I'm saying that indigenous is the notion that belongs to a territory. You know, it's always concerned. What is indigenous in an etymological sense? Indigenous is the one that is that belongs to the territory. That's native from a territory. So I consider that our psychology belongs to a territory. So in relation to the territory it belongs, this psychology is indigenous. But when this, some psychologies are spread all over the world, ignoring the territorial conditions of different parts of the world, so then it becomes colonialist, you know? So if the scientific psychology is only the discourse of a very small segment of indigenous societies in the world, so it doesn't, if psychology is not able to include other discourses and practices, then it becomes colonialist. Nevertheless, to include the indigenous conceptions and practices in the dialogue with the psychological science, we need to focus on this gap between the ways the Western society construct knowledge and the ways indigenous society construct knowledge. So from the rites of the Western society, from the myths of the Western society, we have philosophical reflection and scientific knowledge. Of course, it's one part. We could include here arts, we could include here politics and other branches of development in the Western society. And also here in the indigenous communities, we have other rites, other narratives, other reflections that culminates into shamanism and other ways of reflections and organization and practical organization of life. So from these different ways of knowledge construction, we have a big gap, and this big gap is the focus of our indigenous network, because we are not trying to force the indigenous reflection into the scientific, the now scientific knowledge. So we need to open, the idea is to open the now scientific knowledge in order to understand and to transform itself in an inclusive way of the Amerindian reflection. Our strategy was, one of our strategies in the Indigenous Network was to build an indigenous house in the university campus. Because when we invited the indigenous people to give talks in the university, we observed and they told us that the auditorium situation, it was not the most appropriate situation in order to communicate the indigenous knowledge, in order to discuss the indigenous ideas. So we had the need to build an adequate space. That it was built here is an indigenous traditional house, and only after we built this house, some indigenous asked us to do psychotherapy, for instance. They were not available to do psychotherapy in the clinical center we have here in the university. That's this building in the left side. But they want, after we built the house, the indigenous traditional house, they asked us to make psychotherapy inside the indigenous house. And that's, as you see in this picture, is a house made of wood, and also I don't know how to say it in English. This material that's from the earth, taken from the earth here and put in the walls. And then here we have some people coming to the inauguration. It was inaugurated in 2017. They came here to inaugurate the house, to sing and to dance in front of the house. And inside the house, we have the ceremonials, because the ceremonials define ways of dialoguing and ways of being open to listen to each other. Here is this is another event. Here we bring the indigenous. They play here, and researchers and students, they listen to the people and to the talks. Okay, so back to the problem. From practical university extension activities, we have carried out research in the field of psychology, focusing on the history and philosophy of psychology, as we said before, with the aim of colonizing the territorial knowledge. How and why? Now I'm going to the research part. We made a dialogical analysis of all public activities of this network from 2012 to 2022. So it's 11 years of extension projects. We made a data management map, including name of the product, location, type of production, text, images, video, projects, reports, news, etc. Date of publication. Then we made a sheet, and when this product were published for the first time, and then we analyzed the extraverbal situation, who, for whom, when, and where this product, this document, who participates in the production, and for whom it was constructed, when it was constructed, and where, what are the places it refers, because sometimes we make a report of a visiting to an indigenous community, and sometimes there is a report of indigenous communities or indigenous people coming to the university. So we sometimes visited institutions out of the university to have talks or to dialogue. So we have all these situations, the situation in which the talks are produced. And the semantic content reference on health and well-being, because the focus of our research is health and well-being. So how health and well-being appears discussed in these documents. And then after we map all this, we can interpret the expressive aspect, the dialogic tensions between the participants in the production of the published content. So the document is a vestige of human and not only human, as we will see, human and non-human beings interaction. So we need to interpret what happened there in order to have this document as a registration. So we observed that we have an oscillation of the number of public vestiges we have in every year. We started with 3, then we have in 2013, 17, 21. So we have it's around 240 public documents we found. And we found this tendency of the increment of the production, the number of products. But it's not a linear increment. We have a sort of some peaks of production here. And we observed that in the peak years, we have relevant events happening in this extension network. In 2014, the creation of the forums at the university concerning the struggle for fundamental rights, land demarcation, health and education in the communities respecting indigenous specificities. So in 2014, we have these forums. They demanded us to make some forums about the presence and the visibility of indigenous people in São Paulo. I remember that they were very concerned with land demarcation at the moment because their lands were not yet demarcated, so they were struggling for land demarcation, struggling for land. They are still struggling for land, but in this moment they could do a step further because in Brazil we have a long bureaucratic process in order to accomplish a land demarcation. So in 2014, they could get the sign of the Justice Minister of Brazil, allowing, attesting that they have the right of this land here in São Paulo. And then we have another peak year here is 2017, is the year of the inauguration of the Bia Guarani ceremonial house, the House of Indigenous Cultures in Brazil. I just showed you the pictures. It was this 2017. And 2021 is another peak. And for me, the relevant event here is the height of the pandemic and the deepening of remote forms of interaction, and the construction of a portal, a website of our network. So the data analysis allowed us to identify those relevant events and to understand that, for me, they are about creating conditions for dialogue. Different conditions of dialogue here, before the house, with the house, the traditional house, and the remote ways of dialoguing. So all these promote the amplification of the network activities. And concerning these dialogical conditions, it's very important to understand the synchronization process, the synchronization of the meeting rites of each community involved. Because we have, I could say, a very guided or institutionalized way of communicating in the university. So for do these extension projects, we need to submit a project, we need to wait the answer of the project, then we execute the project, and then we make a report of the project we have all these very ritualized ways of communicating in the university. And in the indigenous communities, the ways of communicating is very different. The ways are very different from the university. And we had to learn how to communicate. And also how to synchronize both ways of communicating. So from comings and goings of the university students to the indigenous communities and of people from indigenous communities to the university, the following demands were highlighted: to expand and make visible the space for dialogue, leading to the creation of the forums, 2014. Adapting interaction environments, ending with the construction of the House of Indigenous Cultures, 2017. And deepening remote forms of interaction without losing face-to-face forms. So face-to-face and remote, we call Yemboate, is the label, the name Guarani people have to talk about meetings. So, and we are learning how is the indigenous, how to dialogue in the meeting, because we have a moment where there is no direct confrontation of ideas. There is a moment where each person can talk, and everybody in the meeting can talk and listen. And those who wake up and talk in the front of the house, they are listening to from the beginning to the end, and they are not confronted. And there are other guidance for how to talk inside the indigenous house. That's not the same way of talking as we have in the class, in a class in another building of the university. So we are learning, and not only learning how to talk during this meeting, but the preparation we need to make before, and also after, how to finalize and how to take care of this environment in order to, before the meeting starts and after the meeting ends. So there is a lot of things happening. And to finish, to open the opportunity for us to listen to some commentaries and questions, I prepared this summary about the steps towards building knowledge in indigenous psychology, because we are calling the knowledge we are producing after the house was built there as indigenous psychology. Because, yes, I started from cultural dialogical psychology. I identified myself as a cultural psychologist or dialogical psychologist. I think I don't lost my background. So I broke this background, but after the house was built, we started to understand the indigenous, understand a little bit more about the indigenous system of knowledge and the indigenous understanding of, in a concrete way, in a very practical way, how to proceed and what emerged from the meetings experience. And then also we started to, we had to learn the indigenous words and the indigenous systems of knowledge, the indigenous epistemology. Of course, I'm talking about the specific epistemologies we are in contact here, because we have 5,000 indigenous people. We cannot forget that. We don't, it's not possible to forget that we have 5,000. So maybe 5,000 epistemologies. So we are talking about one very specific based on our experience. But also it opens a question in psychology, that's how also we understood that the mainstream psychology or the psychology we learn mainly learned in the university are based on the experience and the ways of communicating and the ways of reflecting in Western and North American societies. So indigenous psychology is also about questioning the um, colonialism that persists in indigenous in psychological dominant theories, and also showing the alternative indigenous ways of reflecting about what's going on, the processes in course. So from a non-shared extraverbal situation, we didn't have, we had, before our project, we had in Institute of Psychology, some research with indigenous people, but it was very small and punctual, I could say. It was not something persistent as we did. So we depart from a non-shared extraverbal situation, an anonymous existence, to start to experience together and to create this regularity in our experience between academic and indigenous communities. So body, affection, engaging in the experience. And from this experience, we have something to say. We can talk what we lived. We have narratives of experience. Feeling, thinking, the dynamics of the world, the elaboration of the phenomenal field is what happened. We have each student that visits a community has a report, something that happened, what they feel, what they think, so on. And then we have the critic process, the reflections that emerge from these experiences, and the possible movements we make. We decide, okay, we will start a forum, we need to build an indigenous house here, how can we dialogue, transfer our face-to-face in Mboate to a a remote in Mboate, a remote meeting. How can we learn from the face-to-face experience and also produce transformation in the remote experience. So all these steps was necessary in order to create a shared extraverbal situation that's the condition for dialogue. If we don't have the basic conditions for dialogue, it cannot happen. So we cannot actually understand each other. We cannot actually be create or construct good outcomes from the interaction. So thank you, Pina, and thank you for your presence here. I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Danilo. Has been an extremely interesting talk. And there are already a couple of questions for you. And as I said before, please, anybody wants to make comments or wants to ask something, you may do by using in any kind of language you want. We can translate in English for Danilo, but it might be even Portuguese or Spanish or Italiano if you wish. So there are a couple of questions for you, Danilo, already. One is from Luca Tateo, who asked, hi, Danilo, thanks a lot for the interesting and stimulating talk. Some people use the term psychocolonization to include both the settler colonialism, taking indigenous land, and extractivist colonialisms, taking away knowledge and resources. Do you think psychology should not just decolonize, but support anti-colonialist struggle? In this case, how? And with what consequences for the current psychology?
Thank you, Luca. That's a very important question, and I agree. Yes, I think that psychology should collaborate with the anti-colonialist struggles, because I think that if the colonized society vanishes, there is no possibility of knowledge construction based on their knowledge, their traditional knowledge, you know. So if the colonial society finishes its colonial purpose, then there is not diversity, these authorities are excluded, and they are not possible to improve the psychological knowledge. So we need to, before we start to get knowledge, we need to support the communities. These people need to live, they need to be alive there. They need to be comfortable in their communities. They need to be with health and well-being, and then their experience can be shared. So there is an ethical need that is before the discussion and the critical discussion and so on. The ethical need is to be together with them, and that's why we talk about the extension program came before the scientific research project. The extension program is the way the academic community could collaborate with the indigenous community. And after this collaboration is strong, then it may be possible to decide which kind of research is relevant here. So for me, that's something I learned about this process I lived, and for me that's the consequence. First, an ethical concern that's based on the resist together with the community to the colonial forces that tries to eliminate these people. And after resisting together, we can understand what's relevant to study. I don't know if I gave a complete answer, but yeah, it's what came out to my mind now.
Great, thank you. There is already another question, and a couple of questions actually. One is from Alessio Surian, Italian professor, who wrote both in English and in Portuguese. So thank you, Alessio. Você poderia apresentar um estudo de caso de coprodução de conhecimento e seus principais elementos metodológicos? Could you please present a case study on knowledge co-production and its key methodological elements?
Yes, I think that, for instance, the construction of the House of Indigenous Cultures in the university campus is a co-construction of knowledge here. For instance, I could say the construction of this house was not very easy or simple. First, we had to understand that the auditorium in the university was not a good space for the indigenous to communicate their knowledge, their experience. So before we created the forums, we invited indigenous from urban context in São Paulo and from the communities. They came here. We made around 7 forums each month. It was a couple of people coming, invited, and they made talks about the issues like land demarcation issues they were facing, health care assistance they need, or education. It was recorded. It is there in the platform of the university. All these videos are there for if any of us are interested in go there and transcribe and analyze the speeches. It's available. But in the background of these meetings, the indigenous, they came to me and say, it's not, I don't feel comfortable to talk in this place because the walls, the way how people are, they are set in the audience, the environment is not very adequate. And then we, walking through the campus, we observed that there is a house of indigenous traditions here. There was some house of Afro-Brazilian tradition here. We have in the city of São Paulo a different space for different traditions to speak and to make events. And why we don't have, we didn't have a house of indigenous culture and traditions guided by indigenous principles? Why it's not there? And then we wrote a project. We asked the dean of the Institute of Psychology if together, it was a co-authored project, explaining why we need this house. And then we had to apply this project to get funding to build the house. And we had a problem in the university because the sector that takes care of the buildings, they say that the house should be built in an alignment, in the same alignment of the other houses in the Institute of Psychology. And then we had to bring and make workshops, bringing the indigenous elders in order to explain to the architects why the house should be in a different position, because it's related to the sun, where the sun shines and the sun downs. So it has the communication with the position of the sun and other issues. So as you see, and I think in the next paper I'm writing, we could give this report in a more detailed way. A lot of steps, and it took some years in order to make this dialogue possible. So that's one case I would like to focus.
Thank you very much. Okay, there are other questions in row. This one is from Leonardo Magalhães, who is asking, Professor, no projeto de extensão da USP, você tem alguma parceria com o pessoal da CESAI ou do movimento Acompanhamento Terra Livre? And translated in English will be, Professor, in the project of extension that the University of São Paulo is doing, you have any collaboration with the CESAI or with the movements of free land?
Yes, for instance, we were invited to collaborate with multi-professional network about healthcare in one of the communities here in São Paulo. So we are part, and in these meetings, there is CESAI and other institutions participating. That CESAI is the, how would say, the institution that takes care on indigenous health assistance in all Brazil. So there is in Brazil a public health care assistance for all Brazilian population, and we have a subsystem that is a subsystem that focuses only on the indigenous people. So we have some dialogue with them in different moments. Recently, for instance, we were asked from the CASAI, that's the house of indigenous, a house that hosts indigenous people in treatment in hospitals in São Paulo. So they have a house in a neighborhood of São Paulo. They asked us, for instance, to create a partnership in some projects. So we are Sometimes we have, sometimes we are close, sometimes not so close, but it happens. And the Acampamento Terra Livre that just happened last week. I was there 2 years ago. I could not go this year because I have a young baby in my house. I could not leave. But but one of our students, he was there. That's Leandro Caraimirim. He's a master student with me. He's an indigenous person, and he was there in our place, and he will probably bring us today some news about what happened there.
Okay, now I will ask myself something if I can, because this webinar series has been, built as a platform for discussing community-based intervention. And I would very much thanks for all your suggestions. You have already provided us with a lot of different elements to discuss and to elaborate further. But I would very much, if you may, to point it out a bit on the way in which you, as your work and as a university professor, together with the indigenous population, has built a new form of healing people, and what are the things you are doing for community-based intervention, for counseling, for promoting the well-being?
Well, one point here is some of the indigenous students, they report that coming to the university is not so easy. Some of them, they come from different parts of the country. They are living alone in São Paulo, or they don't have a community here. And to find an indigenous house in the university campus, it's meaningful because they can connect with their ancestrality, the ancestors. They can connect with each other, and they can feel and understand that what they are doing is meaningful for their original communities. They are not distanced from them, but it can be connected. How the academic knowledge can be connected with the needs of my community. Because my experience, because when I started to study psychology, I was the only indigenous person in the Institute of Psychology, as far as I knew. And I felt very much alone and without possibility to talk about my experiences in a way that I could feel that people could understand. No? So that's basic. You need to have a community to become healthy human beings. So I think one aspect is to create this community feeling. And other part is like after we could create this community feeling, they started to ask us to do psychotherapy one-to-one also. And the one-to-one psychotherapy, but in the house of indigenous cultures, because what I observe in this, because I do supervise the psychotherapeutic, and also I practice that. I observe that people the trust a big part of the trust we could build and people could build in order to be able to talk about very sensitive and very delicate aspects of their life is based on the fact that they know that we are how to say that, it's hard to find in English the word, but we are concerned with the indigenous specificities. We respect, and not only respect, we are enthusiastic of the indigenous values and ways of living. So they feel that they will not suffer prejudice from the therapist, because it happens. If the therapist is not well prepared, he or she can, without reflecting, reproduce some violence in the therapeutic process. So we have a very attentive concern about that. And I think, and also we go to the indigenous communities and we transform our bodies through the experience in the communities, through the experience of the rituals, because we participate in the community rituals. And then our body is also transformed in the sense that it becomes more sensible to listen or to see. We think, and of course, all of that we need to study. That's why I decided to make a research project to analyze the trajectory of the network, because now we need to understand the impact of this in our way of do psychology, you know. But one aspect we discuss with the community is based on the need of transforming the embodied sensibility in order to be able to listen to things that usually we are not able to listen, or people that are trained in the urban context, they are not able to listen. What is this? I think is it's something that it's hard to define yet into psychological terms. I don't want to define it into psychological terms, but in indigenous in the indigenous languages we are in contact, they have names also to talk about those sensible experiences.
So thanks a lot. Wow. I think there's what you said is makes a lot of sense for me, but also for this, the goals of these webinars, because as you all know, these webinars was about creating a dialogue in between the American Psychological Association, International Psychology First, and the Global South, so-called Global South knowledge production, and to learn mutually. And we are very much learning today with you, with what you have discussed and what you have presented to us. So thanks a lot. I think we are reaching our, the end of the conclusion. We are approaching the conclusion of these today webinars. And also I would like personally thank you, Danilo, because today we have made a step further, a new step further, by making this webinar a bit more, let's say, multilingual, because usually it's only in English, but today we have tried out something different. Thank you very much. Thank you for the audience. And I think this is a model that we pursue for the next webinars. So just to conclude, yeah, I will just really thank you all participants. There are a lot of people participating today. I'm so happy about that. And you, particularly you, Danilo, and we would love to hear about you all. What are your feedback? So you may write your comments on the website of APA Division 52 International Psychology. I also personally encourage you to become member if you wish, to help us to make something new in this direction, in the direction we are today, right? So, and just to conclude, on behalf of Division 52 and on behalf of Division 52 Webinar Committee, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, and we'll see each other in the next occasion. Bye-bye. Ciao, Danilo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.